What is up, everyone? Your host SBPhilos4 here, back with another episode of the RePHIL Studio. As always, let's refill to 99, as we always do. Get those cans ready, because this episode I have the pleasure and honor to welcome special guests Aris as well as Pandar to the studio today. Brief introduction for both of them. Aris has notably third place in the, I believe it was called the Hagumi and the Happy Dinosaur event, the Dino Hagu event. And Pandar, a returning guest, so many people should be familiar with him. Just to add to our intro that I already did in a previous episode, he has now also added a T1 title to the Backstage Pass 4 event since the last time we spoke. So both of you, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today in the RePHIL studio.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for the invite.
All right. So again, to start things off in the episode, we always want to sort of get an idea of how our guests got into Bandori and how they kind of got into the series and such. So Aris, as a new guest, we'll start with you. So what is your origin story? So how did you first hear about Bandori and how did you got into the series?
Well, I think like a lot of other people, I came from School Idol Festival.
Mm-hmm.
I played that game a lot. And then Bandori came out, and then I distinctly remember one of my friends on Twitter spreading Sayo Hikawa propaganda. I was like, oh, she's pretty cool. I think she's pretty great. So, but then I was still playing School Idol Festival. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll just not play Bandori. And then, well, clearly I did, because I'm here. But I didn't actually play on launch. But I was at a family dinner about a month after launch during I believe it was called Searching for Stars with Kino. And my sister pulls out her phone and she's like, hey, check out this cool new rhythm game I downloaded. I was like, oh, tell me about it. And she pulls out Bandori. She's like, do you want to try? And then I was bored at the dinner table. So like we were out to eat, nothing was happening. And so I played the game. And I was like, within 15 minutes, I was like, thanks, good game. And then we went back home and I downloaded the game. And but little did I know was that the day I started was the day that the event was ending. So I was like thinking like, oh, he looks really cute. Like I want to look at one of these event cards, and then I did. And I vowed to change. I vowed to change, and then I kept blowing from there. I've been there for like 4 years now.
Wow. That's pretty funny. The fact that it was a friend who was sort of sharing some Sayo propaganda. Props to your friend. I totally would 10 out of 10 endorse that propaganda. And then your sister kind of got into it as well. Like, I guess coincidentally was Hina that sort of like popped out for you. So both Hikawa siblings contributing a little to your origin story. Aris, when as you kind of start playing the game, like I imagine though that your favorite character, your favorite band is sort of changed as you start to learn more about the characters and series, right?
It actually has not changed. I'm still a fan. Okay. Well, welcome to the club. You're definitely not a lone member there. We are a very big bunch. we are definitely a very big bunch. And what about your favorite band? Was that like something that was up for contention at any point? Unfortunately, no. Well, or fortunately, yes, because I ended up sticking with Rosalia. I really like their music, and it was Sayo's group. And I've been a Rosalia fan for like the whole game, basically.
For sure. Awesome. Well, that's a really fun origin story. Usually, like, again, it's friends or siblings who kind of joined the influence. And a lot of people didn't play at the start, but of course, eventually kind of got into it, which is pretty neat to hear. Pandar, we already heard about your origin story. So again, for those who are unfamiliar, feel free to check out our previous episode with Pandar for his origin story there. But as maybe a different question for yourself, How has the series been treating you since the last time we spoke? Any major developments on your interest in the series, or have you started to perhaps look and put your focus on other series in the meantime? Or again, is Bandori sort of still like your kind of go to your comfort zone here?
So, a couple days ago when I logged in, I had a welcome back campaign. So that might tell you a little bit of how it's been since Backstage Pass 4. But yeah, no, I mean, to be completely honest, that there's like a 99% chance when this current event ends that I will no longer be playing Bandori.
That's fair.
I'm consider myself a very, very casual Project Sekai player at the moment. But I just work too much and don't have a lot of free time anymore.
Yeah, that is definitely fair. I recall a few events here and there. Like, it always kind of seemed like you were going to go for it, and then you have that initial push, and then of course life happens, and it's definitely something, right? It's not easy to be able to play this game quite often as you do, but on a more casual perspective, is it still something that you're like still kind of relatively into, or Sekai is sort of grabbing your attention now?
Yeah, I still love the franchise. I'll still watch the shows as they come out and stuff like that. The game itself, like I said, I'm pretty much retiring my main. I might play on a less known secret sort of alt, but I don't plan to really tier very high on it. Maybe some T100s here or there, but pretty done with my main. There's not much I want to accomplish on it.
Yeah, and we'll certainly talk about your big accomplishments, the accomplishment you have achieved since we've last spoken. So I definitely look forward to talking more about that, Pandar. It's going to be really neat to hear that, and really interesting to hear that story. Apart from, of course, Bandori, again, both you, Pandar, and of course Aris as well, both of you are into other games and such. Project Sekai being the one that's sort of definitely grabbing a lot of people's interest. Definitely not, you two aren't the only ones who mentioned that Sekai has kind of taken over in a lot of sense. I just want to maybe discuss with both of you, just kind of get an idea, like, in terms of like comparing the two games, like, is there any particular things that you've noticed that you generally prefer between one game versus the other? Anything to note in regards to, like, maybe some similarities or differences between the two series?
Do you want to take this one?
The first thing that came to mind was just that that Sekai felt a little more comfortable to play in terms of how the lanes, I guess, on the rhythm game was angled. Because when I went back to tier Bandori later on, I ended up modding the Bandori notes to look as close as possible to Sekai as possible.
Yeah, so gameplay fluidity definitely quite different. I also do agree that Sekai maps have pretty like unique characteristics. They're very they have a lot of very nice patterns that are pretty fun to play. They can get pretty challenging to the point where you think, is this really designed for two fingers or two thumbs? But I guess it is, and but the challenge of it and overall fluidity of the game definitely feels definitely quite good. I also can tell that, like, in general, because it's a new franchise, new series of characters, it's always like it's a fresh take. And of course, Bandori, we're approaching its 5.5 year anniversary of the game. It's definitely getting old. Project Sekai still being a relatively new game, so I do understand that's also pretty it's quite it is quite fresh as well. Anything else to mention? Like, anything that in particular that maybe for viewers out there who maybe aren't familiar with Project Sekai, which is far and rare now, but anything else that you want to like mention about similarities, differences, and such?
For me, like, yes, the core gameplay is very similar, but I personally feel like it's a completely different game once you get into the higher difficulties. There's some mechanics that just aren't in Bandori that I honestly, like, I'm pretty bad at Sekai, and I consider myself pretty above average at Bandori.
Yeah.
And there's just some patterns that my brain cannot register. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nice fresh of breath air if you're used to Bandori. I think there's a clear difficulty increase from the hardest songs in Bandori. So,
yeah,
it's cool.
For sure. Like, I personally think as well with Sekai, when I play Sekai, I don't know if you agree with this, Pandar. I think one of the notes I struggle the most is when there's like a small note followed by like a fat note. And like
in the same spot,
near like the same spot, like, or like right after one after another. I just can't think of that. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, they designed it to be a gallop, but it just doesn't register in my brain as a gallop. And I always try and double tap it, and then it's just a mess. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's actually kind of gross. That's one thing that I'm also kind of getting used to with Sekai as well. So, but yeah, it's funny because like when I was at I was just at a random convention here and there, and this is like a totally tangent, so apologies, but random I was just at a convention and I was just talking with people, and it's just like there's so many people that are like now playing like the new fad of Sekai and End Stars, right, everyone's favorite. So it's like, it's kind of like funny. I was thinking, maybe like people have just all moved on and maybe they don't think about Bandori anymore, but it turns out there's some people still like decently familiar with the series and still play it from time to time. But it's definitely quite interesting to see like just kind of some similarities and differences between the two franchises. Okay, but let's move on and talk a little bit more about tiering, because Aris, for you, getting into the game casually, right, just learning about the Hina card and such, it's definitely nice, right, getting into the series casually. But when did you decide that tiering was something that you wanted to do for the game? Like, what kind of motivated you that tiering was something you wanted to try out?
I joke a lot in our friend group about R2 being the catalyst for everyone tiering. It's not just me, it's like a bunch of other people. But I think I first found out about tiering as a concept, like back in School Idol Festival days, because I remember like my coworker T3, like in an early Nico event, and my other friend was like tiering top 100 like every event for a favorite character. And I was like, this takes up way too much time. There's no way I'm doing this like ever. And then time passed, and it was doing like casual like T1Ks on Bandori, because I also like did some super casual tiers on School at the Festival too. And that's when I met R2 on a completely different game. Actually, we played MMO, and we ran into each other, and then we found out that we both played Bandori, and we were talking, and then she was telling me how she had some titles, and I think at the time it was like 2019, so she would have had like top 10 in I think it was the Child Hagumi event, and then she ended up tiering like T2 on Marche, and I was like, so maybe like. And that's when I started interesting about tiering, because then she was going for T1. I was like, maybe I can tier, because she was like, not to turn this into an R2 podcast, but like she like ended her tiering through T1K for like all her events. And at the time I only did it like just for fun for myself. And then Noble Rose 1 was probably the first event that I had the desire to tier higher than T1K, because I really liked the event song. I thought the event card was super pretty. I like Lisa, I like Sayo. So the event came out, and I found out about popcorn rooms, and that's when that was my first attempt of tiering. I just tiered in popcorn, like sat there as long as I could. and I got the title. And after that, the next thing I did was I tiered for ReZero because it's also the same thing, the Roselia cool challenge live. But this time I got the opportunity to do it in someone's server, not just Popcorn, and that was like a complete experience in terms of efficiency, I found. And then like 2 years passed, and then I skipped right to the T3. No T10, just T3.
We'll definitely talk about that T3 definitely later in the podcast for sure. And that's a pretty big jump to go from just some casual tiering, well, at least first kind of learning about it, and then many years later after some practice, he just kind of went straight for that T3. But when you first got into like PubCord and doing rooms there, like what was that experience like, and how did that like change? How did your perception change once you actually joined like an actual tiering server?
Well, I actually wondered at times whether or not the efficiency of Popcorn was good for terms of like a lot of people came in and they did like 3 games to burn stamina, like just their three flame games, and then they left. So a lot of time we're just waiting around for people to show up, and there's a lot of like room swaps. So in comparison, I think in the tiering server I was in for ReZero, there were more people who were burning sets at a time. So it felt a lot more efficient because everyone would just be done their sets at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big jump, right? When it comes to like efficiency and like how serious some people are going. They're not just the word there's firefighting, right? Just burn your flames and then just call it a day. But joining a tier serve definitely quite different. Did you find it like a bit overwhelming at first, or like how did you even find the tiering server?
It was thanks to R2 again.
Oh, okay. We now have a big whale fluencer here.
True. Yeah. I think I mentioned to her like I was thinking about tiering ReZero. I like ReZero. I liked Roselia. I love Amelia. So she was like, "Hey, I have a friend that's tiering. You want to join a server? He's going for T1." And then I went in, and yeah.
It's fair. That's definitely quite fair. So R2 not only helping you get into tiering for the first time, kind of understanding what that is, but also getting to your tiering server for the first time, and then I imagine as well kind of influencing to your T3, which again we'll talk about later. But it's sometimes influence is a good thing, but it's also I imagine that you wouldn't had it any other way. You would have a big shout outs to that MMORPG that the two of you played then.
Shout out to Navinogi on this Bandori podcast. So true.
For sure. So overall, like just before you actually went for that big like tiering title, but like with ReZero and with the Noble Rose one, like were you able to get the goals like that you wanted, and did you find it quite challenging, or did you find it like overall like pretty fun?
So that time I decided to put myself on a schedule. With Noble Rose 1, when I tiered for it, I think I spent the first couple days of the event slacking, and then I realized that this event's kind of busy. It's Roselia. I guess I should pick the pace. And then, like I think the first couple days of Noble Rose 1, I only did like 1 side per day for the first 3 days, and then the rest of it I was just like living in Popcorn basically the whole time. But in ReZero, I did some math and decided like, okay, I'm gonna do 2 sets per day, and this should get me to my goal of T100. And then anything else I did after that was just extra, basically. I think I did more than the 2 sets per day for ReZero in the end. Yeah, it comes to my goal. I think I placed pretty high in T100 because I got 40s, I believe. And I like doing events like where I do all the grinding. Early enough that I don't need to worry about being chased by the borders. So in that case, I spent the last hour of the event trying to learn how to park, basically.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. for sure. And then like I believe were both of them they're both challenge lives, were they?
Yeah, they were both challenge lives. So that's why people were saying like all the challenge lives in the world have prepared me for that T3.
So it's so funny because like a lot of our previous guests, they all kind of despise challenge lives, but that's sort of like what like this challenge lives is just you, right?
Unfortunately, challenge lives are all I know, so nothing will faze me ever again.
Oh boy. Yeah, challenge lives are always like the fun stuff where you never know where you really are at until like the last like couple hours, and then see how many people are burning their challenge points and such. But yeah, but that's really neat to hear. Aris, is really interesting to hear that you're able to learn from tiering the challenge lives, and then eventually kind of get a really amazing challenge life title yourself many years later. Before we talk about that, though, I just want to I'm also curious as well, because, of course, you and Pandar are both special guests in this podcast. The two of you do know each other, but do you two remember the first time that you two met? Was it like relatively recently? Could have been in Seikai probably, or in a Bandori event?
So, yes and no.
Okay.
The first time we met that I can think of is like interacted with each other. I think we had a small interaction in the Title Idol server. But that's like we didn't really know each other. I also was in the same ReZero server because I recognized she used to have this weird Pikachu profile picture, and you can't you don't forget that when you see it. But as far as when we became friends, it was definitely in Seikai. So
yeah, and I do recall that there is a little small community as well. I believe it's the 174 community. I believe there's a lot of you listening to this live right now from that community. Either of you could tell me a little bit more about about this little small community of Seikai players that are now Seikai players.
Well, slight correction, we're not a Seikai server. We are a Fall Guys, Final Fantasy 14, karaoke,
Apex.
Every Apex, you name it. Everything but Seikai.
That's actually hilarious.
We hate Seikai, and we encourage everyone in 174 to stop tiering 1, 2, 3.
Basically, it's your it's your like friendship is over with Seikai tiering or server, not even a tiering server, just like a server, a community in general.
But the secret behind that is we're really bad at stopping tiering. So it doesn't work.
Hence, we see a bit of we see some representation of 174 and in the Seikai leaderboards and the Bandori leaderboards. I don't think you guys are doing a pretty good job at that.
Yeah.
We had our moment of rep during Hagumi, our one and done, our moment of existence. Now we live on Seikai, or we don't because we aren't tiering. Absolutely not tiering.
10 out of 10, definitely not tiering.
Yeah. But as far as like where 174 came from, I actually like joined the group kind of a couple months, I think, after it was created. So I'll let Aris kind of tell that story if she remembers it.
Yeah, so the first event I tiered in Seikai was Sing & Sing, and we didn't have like a server or anything. It was just like our group of friends, basically. Some of us are in the audience right now. And we saw a lot of people with tags in their name, and we're like, let's give ourselves a name. Let's pick a tag for ourselves. So we went on YouTube. We went straight to the what's the video called? Like Cantonese numbers and like meetings for Cantonese numbers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I like my Cantonese is trash, but it basically translates to die together in Chinese, which is basically what you do in tearing. So that became our name, and then a bunch of us started tearing, and then we ended up growing our little group of friends into one with like. Now our group is actually quite big, and we have a lot of like real friends that we play Fall Guys, Final Fantasy, and everything Subsekai together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's basically the origin of it. We were a small group of friends that ended up growing into a bigger group of friends.
For sure. And yeah, I think the Cantonese, I think it would be yet say or something like that. My Cantonese is also not great, but yeah, that does basically mean what you said. We all died together. But it's really funny because again, it's always great to see how like the community really evolves, because at some point you'll definitely meet some really good friends when you're tearing, even though at the end of the day all you're doing is just tapping on the screen, playing the same song over and over again. But it's kind of hard to believe that you could build some really great friendships through that, and then be able to build a community from that, and support each other through tearing or not tearing, depending on what you guys end up wanting to do. So it really we have some trauma bonding, sure. I suppose that is the case. But regardless, it's really fun to see how like these friendships bond the community and such. Pandar, I think I recall you were able to meet some of your fellow tearers IRL and be able to kind of chill with them as well.
Yeah, it's funny because I always I've been playing Bandori pretty much since the start.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, it was common that all the whales and tearers would go to cons and they'd take these silly little photos with their phones all next to each other, with their titles showing that they met up. And I was always like, I want to do that someday. I just want to meet some of these tiers. And although I've met some people before at cons, I've never taken one of those pictures before. So it was cool to not only meet some of the people that not only do I know through the community, but I actually consider really good friends at this point, but also be able to live my silly dream of wanting to take one of those pictures.
Yeah, I have the exact same sentiment as well. When I first got it, saw tier people and people coming together, putting those silly phones together and taking those silly pictures, I'm thinking one day maybe I'd be able to do that as well. Yeah. So
yeah, it's silly, but it's cool. It's I mean, who takes pictures of themselves anymore, right? You just take pictures of your achievements next to each other, and it does the same thing. It saves the memory, and it's nice.
It's putting the little JPEGs together. Yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned that as well, because I was also able to, just like you, eventually also realize that as well. Had a couple meetups with a few people as well, take the pictures. One of them was indeed aris. We were able to meet up, surprisingly. I think you're one of the very few guests that I actually ended up meeting in person first before inviting them to the podcast. So you have a very special title privilege there. I also was able to meet your biggest whale fluencer, R2, as well. So we had a really fun, there was a really small photo shoot there with our profiles as well. So that was definitely a lot of fun. Good.
Yeah, I remember you showed up at her table and you were like, hey,
I make Bandori content, guys. That was the lamest intro ever.
And then I was like, wait, are you Phil?
Guys, I make Bandori content on YouTube.
Hey, sometimes the lamest starting jobs are the best icebreakers.
Yeah, you were recognized 5 words in.
Yeah, it was actually so funny. R2 was just like, oh my god, you're Phil.
R2's funny.
Yeah, R2's actually hilarious. So it was really fun to actually meet the three of you in person. So that's definitely a really, really fun experience. And of course, I do hope to meet more people in the future once things settle down in the world, when maybe conventions reopen to like have bigger stuff, right? And maybe we'll see more people around. But it's really cool to be able to keep in touch with the community where initially you were bonding through playing A to Z over and over again, and then you're actually meeting in person. It's just so real. It's so cool. So
hey, Anime New York City this year, big 174 meetup. Come meet your favorite 174 members.
Oh, that's so far. It's so
just
far.
Have hard to
rep
bring you in her backpack.
I'm gonna get abducted to NYC.
Just give her your device and we'll pretend you're there when we take the
picture. Oh boy. Well, we'll see about that. But that would be a really interesting meetup. I definitely look forward. I'll be there in spirit probably. But I do look forward to seeing those lovely goofy pictures as well for the profiles. Definitely look forward to that. Hey everyone, it's Phil here. Hope you enjoyed the episode so far. As a reminder, the RePHIL Studio podcast is available on all of your favorite platforms. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and make sure to give that high rating or the thumbs up whenever you do, because helping the podcast increase its reach to other viewers is greatly appreciated. In terms of other content, check out my VODs channel, the card description above. Consider subscribing to check out other content. And also, if you want to be a part of the content, join the Anga Academy Discord server, links in the description below, where you can contribute to the studio question every week and interact with special guests featured on the podcast. So looking forward to seeing you there. Last but certainly not least, a big shout outs to all of my Filler Nation members who've been constantly supporting me in my content. I really appreciate each and every one of you, and you get shout outs on pretty much every podcast episode. So thank you so much for your support. If you really like my content and would like to support me, join the Filler Nation by either subscribing to my Twitch channel or by joining my Patreon. Links in the description below. There's also a new feature. You can give a super thanks through my YouTube, so you could do that as well. Any support is greatly appreciated. Let's get back to the episode. So enough about the community. Let's talk a little bit more about your lovely achievements. Pandar, we'll start with you because you have an update since the last time we spoke in your podcast. You talked about your various titles before in your previous episode, including first place, I believe, in the Blossoming Symphony event. Then you ended up getting, since we last spoke, you got first place in Backstage Pass 4. I know this was something that you planned for a very long time, but tell me a little bit more about your thoughts going into preparing for this event, and exactly what motivated you that you wanted to get this title.
Well, finally got a Saya T1.
Yeah.
Finally. That was obviously the biggest reason I tiered it. Going into the event, so for those that know me in the community, I'm usually really, really open about my resources, time, I don't really hide things from the community, and people can kind of gauge a pretty good idea of how much I'll be able to tier throughout an event. But because of how busy I was going to be during this event, I actually think I did an okay job of kind of keeping that on the down low. But I basically didn't play for like 2 days in the middle of the event.
Oh no.
Because it was Easter, and I will prioritize that over anything. So I played the first however many hours, went to visit my family for 2 days and celebrate Easter, and then came back and basically sprinted the last 2 days to catch up to the 4 people I tiered with who ended up parking with me at the same number. So 4 really cool community members that I consider friends, and it was really fun event. Very not that stressful. It wasn't a very contested event, so it was nice to have one of those and just be able to still get the T1 despite prioritizing the stuff that's important to me.
Definitely. And I think it's also quite sentimental about that event, because it seemed like a lot of people who are sort of like maybe sort of like in the graveyard, haven't really touched a game in a while, and there were veterans like way back then. They all kind of like came back and decided, you know what, we're all going to come together and tier once more for the event. Is that right?
Well, so me and Kongala, for those that know him, he's T1 the school closed event, the Saya banner.
Mm-hmm.
We originally planned he was going to T1 the school closed event, I was going to T2 the school closed event, and then we were going to do a reverse for Backstage Pass 4 to both complete our Saya full podiums at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, work happened and I was unable to tier the school closed event, but we were still able to tier the Backstage Pass. So we had planned for a long time to tier that. Dot, who T1 the downtown event, he kind of was iffy about T10 for a while, because he's, like you said, has been kind of on and out with tiering for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while he was just, I guess I'll T10 but nothing more, and we didn't really have a T3. And the joke that I came up with was, every year during Backstage Pass, Backstage Pass, the T1s organize these big T1 walls where they all park together,
Mm-hmm.
and a big screenshot gets posted on Twitter, and it's really neat. And I was like, well, I still want to do that even though I'm going to be T1. So I like kind of joked about it a little bit, and I was like, oh, we should just T1 wall at literal T1. And obviously Konga had one and Dot had one. So Dot's like, I guess I'll podium. And then Mish was T10, and I was like, do you want a T4? And he's like, originally he was like, not really. He didn't want, I didn't blame him. I mean, to play a lot to not get a podium isn't really worth it. So I didn't blame him. I was like, it's just a funny thing. And then Koss, who had taken the week off to tier Sakura, which he T1'd anyway. Actually, no, I think he took off for a Sekai event and then decided to drop it. So he had the week off. He had just gotten a T1. And all I did was just T1 wall with us, and he goes, okay. So Koss decides to tier with us. The event ends up being relatively dead. So Misha's like, I have to secure T10 anyway, so I might as well just play the extra bit. We ended up changing our park like 2 or 3 times because of how how low we were parking. There was one person who we had to worry about, so we kept changing our park. And Misha was like, kept kind of toying with the idea of just saying, you know what, just park without me. But I'm glad he ended up doing it. It was really cool. I mean, 5 people, all with T1s, who have at least some type of friendship with each other, parking together. I thought it was really, really memorable.
Yeah.
And it was a cool event.
For sure. It's like, it's quite interesting, right? Because I don't think there has ever been an event where like the top 5 all shared the same score for first place, and you just kind of like go from there. It's like a big wall of T1s, a literal wall of T1 holders sharing the T1. I have seen, people share podium together, right? All 3 of them have the same score for first, second, third, but going all the way down to 5th is, it's not something we usually see. But then again, we're talking about people like Koss, who is the easiest person to whale fluence. So,
yeah. So just one quick addition that the cherry on top is I turned around and decided to spend the next 2 days or the last 2 days of the event because I was parked, going from 0 EP in Sekai to T10 in 2 days, playing like 40 hours.
Wow.
So that was a fun experience as well.
Oh boy. I know. Like I remember when we talked in our previous episode, when you turn it on and you could literally play for like many hours at end. But again, it's just life commitment sometimes happens, and that's just kind of how it is. But I'm glad that you were able to still obtain the titles in a relatively like relaxed way and a really fun way with old friends and do something that really hasn't been done in Bandori before. So it's great to hear that perspective from you. Funny enough, I actually mentioned about this exact event, the Backstage Pass 4, why there were like 5 people sharing the same T1. I'm like, I wonder if there's a way I could grab a story about that or like what happened there. And lo and behold, we're here already talking about it.
It was just a joke that ended up being really impulsive by everyone, and it happened to work out due to the relatively low cutoff. So a little luck, and everything worked out.
Yeah, well, big props to that. That really sounded like a really fun event. So I'm glad that you're able to sort of take that and really say that that's like one of your biggest achievements, and one of the biggest things you're going to take away before eventually you'll move out of the game. So it's great that you're able to at least achieve that before that happens.
Yeah.
Good. Well, again, Pandar, thanks so much for sharing. One more tiering story coming up, and Aris, we'll go back to you because again, as you mentioned, 2 years after you did some casual in quotation marks, right, tiering for Roselia, you decided out of nowhere to tier for a Hagumi event of all events. What's the story there? What first convinced you that this Hagumi event was going to be the one that you were going to like break, like not only just like surpass T100 but just get T3?
Yeah, so you said earlier you thought R2 was a catalyst, and you would be correct, but not really at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So this was the event that R2 was originally aiming for T1, but then I believe she decided to retire early after getting T3 Ocean National. And then I believe Lang was the person who was going for it next, but then they also dropped. So I started entertaining the thought of tiering Dino Gumi for fun as a tribute, because I hadn't really been playing that much at the time, and I wasn't sure how capable I was at tiering. There was a second event I was also interested in tiering at the time. And so I guess this would be an aside, but me and Pandar ended up talking a lot during one of our other friends' events, which was like super crazy. And this is like an event where I think one of my friends describes this as ruining the concept of start dashes. Because normally people do like 24, it could be like 24 hours time, which is like a normal thing. And these people were doing like 65 hours time dashes.
Yeah.
So and then after that, basically people started doing like longer and longer and longer start dashes. I was wondering how far of a start dash I could do myself, because at the time I was considering doing a podium. So, and I was looking at my Bandori account, and I went up to Pandar and was like, and I showed him like a screen of like 75,000 stars and like 2,000 cans, and I was like, hey Pandar, how far do you think this would get me in an event? And Pandar was like, I think that's enough for a podium, I think.
Yeah, I told her it's definitely enough for podium, and it's probably enough to at least contest for T1.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, I guess I could do this, but I also don't really want to tier alone. And Pandar was like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I had also been toying with the idea of tiering it. I had never T10 the Hello Happy World event, and as soon as R2 dropped, and then I heard Lang dropped, and I was like, well, maybe I'll go for my T2 because that's the one title I'm missing. So I was toying with the idea, and so we kind of pushed each other to tier the event a little bit. Because, like she said, she didn't want to tier alone, and I just kind of needed the nudge to pull the trigger.
Yeah. So that happened, right? Again, the opportunity arose where some big competitors not necessarily were going for it, so the door was open for people to go for it. And Aris, you mentioned about the start dash sprint of going, trying to go as far as you can at the start. How did that go? How did that day one go, right? Because again, this was like, you never had an experience of doing such a big tiering achievement, right? So suddenly going for that and doing that, going for a really big, long start dash for a possible chance of podium. How did that go?
I was originally trying for 48 hours. I think I managed to do 40 before I called it quits. 40 was like my minimum of what I wanted to accomplish, so I was pretty happy with that. So at the time, I think I was like, this can't be healthy.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, it's definitely not healthy. But again, it's pretty interesting because again, just to see how like tiers have evolved, right? Ever since I remember like when the podcast first started, where we talked about like Caster's initial like 60+ hour start dash. And then not too long after, Crow decided to break it herself, a little longer than 60 hours, even surpassing Caster. And then it just kind of became almost like they both said, oh yeah, don't try and aim for that. But then we see more and more people kind of like inching kind of closer to those hours, the 40, 50 hour sprints. It's kind of crazy to see how people really start to push themselves.
I think we just had someone go past 70 in Sekai.
That's crazy.
I think, and don't quote me on that. Like I said, I'm very casual with Sekai, but I think we did.
That is absolutely crazy. I don't know if anyone in the chat will confirm. Yeah, exactly. Wow, exactly 70. That's 100. No, that's just that's too much.
Yeah, he was aiming for 100 hours.
The Sekai tiers are a different breed of mental illness.
hence why I feel like whenever I play Sekai tier, I'm like, why does this feel so much more competitive? Like there's just so much more like things. Like, even just going for like casual like T500 or T1000, I'm like, I feel like I'm playing more than what I need to for like a T100 in Bandori.
And it's more expensive.
It is.
It's not only is it more difficult because there's more competition, but it's more expensive on top of it. Yeah. Like I said, different breed of mental illness. Well, I am involved.
Well, don't worry. You are totally in the anti-tiering server of 174, who will clearly make sure you go the right path, Pandar.
Stop tiering when you our motto, even if no one follows it.
Yeah, we are very bad at convincing ourselves not to tier, even though we try.
Oh boy. but anyway, I was going back to your Dino experience. Like once after that initial sprint, you said you were pretty proud of yourself of that. Like, how did the rest of the event go? Did you was it difficult to keep that up for like 6, 7, 8 days, whatever that event length was? And or did you find it like as you went through, you got the hang of it?
I think waking up on the first the time after I slept for the first time, waking up after that was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, I just felt so cold, and then I realized I didn't get to eat. So that's difficult. But after that, I think I purposely to make it faster and I got to it. After that, I think I was operating on like 20 hours awake, tiering, and then 3 hours of sleep on sleep cycles.
Yeah. So that's pretty typical schedule for most individuals who are going for like T1 or T2 or T3, right? So pretty average schedule. So for newer tiers that might sound a little bit shocking or surprising, but that's definitely the life of trying to go for super high tiering. Did you find yourself like slowly finding ways to make sure you're able to maintain that schedule and motivate yourself to make sure that you're able to keep that schedule in check so that you'd be able to get your goal?
I think one of my biggest motivators that kept me going was just having friends around in the chat. I've invited a lot of people to come spectate my run, like people who didn't play Bandori or Sekai, and a lot of them just came in and was like, I'm going to stream Final Fantasy for like 12 hours. I'm going to stream myself tiering in PvP on Final Fantasy. And I just did this for days, basically. I had so many people around just like to be able to talk to, and like talking to people helped keep me awake quite a bit, or just even listening to my friends talk about like random stuff. Just having the company and motivation of people like you really helps a long way.
For sure. Definitely.
Neon mentioned like the CP calculator. Well, we didn't have like a CP calculator during my run, so I had a friend who like just a long time internet friend, doesn't play any kind of rhythm games or anything, just does computer engineering as a job. And one day before the event, I was like, hey, you want to like build me a CP calculator? So like brought him in, and we lectured him on how Bandori works, and within like a day or so, he had built a decent CP calculator for someone who doesn't know anything about Bandori. And like I think there's one time where Neon, him, and our other friend who's like all good at math, and they were just like talking about the intricacies of making the CP calculator work for like hours, and I felt so like I was like, this is so entertaining.
It's like serious like little math talk here. Like I imagine like the meme where it's like the three kids that meme where the three kids talk about is Fortnite overrated meme, but like it's those three, Neon and the two buddies, just talking about math. And
I could not repeat anything that they said, but it was so entertaining.
Yeah, it was funny because they started and like we were exact opposites. She like got her second and third win at the same time, and I like immediately started falling asleep.
Oh. So the two of you didn't really tier that much together then?
No, we tiered a lot together.
Yeah, okay.
Because originally I was also aiming for a podium place. So we spent a lot of times in a room together. So,
well, that's a lot of that's great to hear. And of course, as you mentioned, Aris, just in general, right? Like the people along the way, just kind of supporting you through the goal and just being there, right? Even if it's just talking about math, it somehow motivates people to keep going and just keep pushing themselves, and you're able to get your title. So and Pandar, I believe you also got your T10 from that as well. So
yeah, that event was nuts. I think there 4 or 5 days in, there were still 6 people with potential to podium that event.
Wow.
It was actually kind of funny. Like, I didn't know any of this was happening because I chose to do a completely blind run. And I think like normally it's hard to do this apparently because people leak, but we were a small server, so my friends were pretty good at keeping me in the dark. So I was like looking at the other podcasts. Like I think Ling and Gandhi were here talking about their Hagumi experience, and hearing like Pandar was like freaking out during the event. They were talking about how competitive it was, and I was just like blissfully unaware, tapping along, not sure like what was going on.
I had no idea. She didn't know what place she was in. She didn't even know she was in T10. She didn't know CP numbers. She didn't even know. I don't even think she knew how much CP she had.
Yeah, like I know I got my friend to make a CP calculator, but I basically just cast it off to other people. I was like, hey, you guys do something with it. Tell me what to do. Manage me to victory, basically.
We created a whole channel that just didn't have Aris in it, and like me and Neon were just freaking out the entire event in that channel because we're like, she's like on pace for T2, T3, but she's also in only 30 minutes of gameplay ahead like of T6. Like it was such a crazy event. Like Bob Paso T1 day was like clearly ahead of everyone, and then there was like a group of 3 that were really close, and then me and one other person were behind them. But everyone was in general relatively close to each other, like I said, up until maybe 60% through the event.
That's hilarious, and that's the beauty of challenge lives as well. Like you really don't know. It's always going to go down to the brink of the wire there, right? So, but maybe for Aris's case, ignorance is bliss. Just tappity tap away, not a care in the mind, and you just do what you can. And maybe that prevented you from getting too nervous about the competitors that were stalking up from behind. Okay, but yeah, overall that's a really, really cool story to hear. And Aris, it seemed like you again, of course, you persevered, got your T3, so big congrats on that. So hopefully you're proud of that title, of course. Any other things that you recall or from either of you about that event?
I have one quick thing.
Yeah.
The cool thing, obviously the event itself was just really cool. It was super competitive. I got to help someone that I like became pretty close with and I consider a really good friend in Aris. And then like on top of that, we had people filling for us that literally reinstalled the game and hadn't touched the game in like 2 years. Just to fill with it. We had people who didn't even play the game that like just filled for us. Like we had a room of like 3 super hyper retired players at one point that were just filling for us out of the kindness of their heart. It was crazy just to see who and how many people came out of seemingly nowhere to just support Aris and me.
Yeah. That's the great part about the community, right? Even though you don't know, like again, if you build the bonds, and although people may have moved on from games, people always will come back if they want to see it help a friend in need. So it is definitely very neat to see that. So, and I'm sure both of you, Pandar and Aris, you definitely appreciated the support that you got throughout the event.
Yeah, when you have Albert 1 going for you.
It's serious.
You know it's a special event.
For sure.
He's like, I never fought for anyone, but here I am, just for you guys.
That's amazing. Shout outs to Albert 1, the legend. The legend.
Yeah, follow R2 Pepper on Twitter.
Well, both of you again, it was a great pleasure to hear from your tiering experiences. There was a lot of fun to hear the achievements, and again, both of you got really amazing achievements. So pat on the back for you for that. So we'll definitely look forward to maybe hearing more tiering stories in the future. But just before we end things off here, I do want to share a quick studio question, and I always ask our special guests as well as anyone listening to the live recording right now a studio question, and I ask every week on the episode. And I'll ask the two of you this question as well. And the question is, we talked about this earlier. I mentioned this a bit earlier briefly, but what would be your biggest wish for Bandori's 5.5 year anniversary? Because for some reason, they're actually celebrating a half-year anniversary for once. They usually don't do that, or at least don't make a huge fuss about it. But for either of you, is there anything in particular that you think that might be your biggest wish for the 5.5 year anniversary, especially considering how, like, again, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, where, people are starting to move to other games and exploring other series. So what could be a game that maybe could convince someone to come back to play Bandori for just a bit?
So, for me, I mean, the way you worded it, what would be your biggest wish? I don't know if I really wish this, because it would probably keep me playing. But there's a few things. I mean, there's specific events, which isn't the question because it's not a feature. That I would come back for, but the big thing like that I would potentially tier for is some type of custom profile where I can kind of put all my achievements on it instead of just 2 titles. I know Lucia, who's a developer of this game, said there's pretty much 0 chance they're ever gonna do custom profiles like Sekai does. But that's one thing. Community manager, sorry. That's one of the things that would probably maybe get me back to try and go for a third T1. But that would be my thing. I like custom profiles. I like being able to be creative, and I like having to show off my achievements.
Definitely. That would be pretty interesting. Of course, the easiest answer is just grab something cool from Sekai and be like, "Hey, Bandori, why don't you do this?" That's like the easiest answer for sure. Aris, what about you? Have you put some thought into it? What would be your answer?
Mostly looking at R2's answer here to add characteristics like Sekai. That sounds like a pretty good idea. So, I'm not the most creative person, so I think, although if I would find the creative use for profiles, though I know like a ton of people would. Also, when you first asked the question, I was like, my first initial thought was like, what if they just had if this was any wish, just like let's have a world, like let's make everyone go on a world tour and bring everyone to North America. It's a little far-fetched for the game itself.
True.
Love to see Roselia in person.
Yeah. Maybe during the 5.5 year anniversary, they announced that they're gonna do something big for the Bandori's 5-year anniversary, and maybe have like a con where they bring all the Bushiroad people over, including legendary community manager Lucia. We'll get to meet him in person. Who knows? Including, of course, our favorite seiyus and individuals involved in the series. I think that'd be pretty cool. If that actually ended up happening, then expect a much bigger 174 meetup that might involve non-174 people suddenly showing up as well. Yeah.
Have a meetup. Oh, not just like with Soap. I think like seeing other people in the community would be pretty nice too.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
And the only other minor thing I can think of is I've always wanted a random costume button, so every time you enter a live, your costume's different. I just like the idea of, being able to see all the costumes I have as someone with, a lot of cards. I don't change the costumes very often, so it'd be cool to have something that just randomizes it every single live.
And honestly, that doesn't sound too difficult to implement. That sounds like something they could maybe do. Like actually quite reasonable. Like the character profiles might be a little difficult, but that does seem pretty reasonable to do.
That's what I think, and I this is like similar to like things I want in almost any game. Like for like League of Legends, I always said, why it's been 12 years, why don't they have a random skin button like that just picks a random skin for you? Like it's just something that seems so easy to implement, and I'm not a programmer or anything, so I don't know how actual easy it is. But it's just something that I would enjoy having in most games.
That's fair. Yeah. We'll see. Maybe the developers listen to my podcast. I doubt it, but maybe that will happen. We'll see how it goes. We'll wait the announcement. I think there's going to be a stream near the end of this month to announce exactly what's happening in that anniversary. So we'll see. And of course, anyone who's listening right now, or anyone who is listening to this podcast later, when it's released on YouTube, please feel free to contribute your ideas as well. Maybe your wish will come true. Who knows? So, well, for both of you, it's been a great pleasure having you on the studio today. Thank you both for taking your time to join and just have a great time talking about your various tiering achievements and many other fun topics. Before we go, I just want to ask for some last words, any shout outs you want to give, and as well, if there's any future events that you want to share that you're planning to do for tiering. I know we talked about how, you're in a community where you're trying to discourage tiering, but obviously that's maybe not going to be the case. We'll see. But you feel free to share any plans that you might have. So Aris, we'll start with you. Any last words, last shout outs, and future events that you may plan to do?
Follow R2Salt on Twitter.com.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I was recently convinced into doing a final run for Sekai to burn another one of those one and done things, just like Dinogumi.
Mm-hmm.
That will probably be my last Sekai tier for the future, unless I get convinced otherwise. But I know many of my friends are still going to be tiering, so I'll be there to support whenever they are.
Yeah, just don't get whale-fluenced too much.
Luck.
Yeah, it's easier to say than to do. It seems.
Her IRLs would be on her about it if she did, I think.
Yeah, I got lectured pretty hard.
She has very good, responsible, supportive friends.
Oh,
that I got to meet during Dinogumi. So
that's funny.
Yeah, I invited a bunch of them to show up, and then they did, and then they rightfully lectured me about my life choices.
That's fair. Hey, again, if we do end up meeting in a local con in the future, Aris, I'll also contribute in helping to make sure that you don't get whale fluenced. Yeah, for sure.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I could lecture R2 in the meantime, and like on the side as well, just be like, hey, no whaling. Pandar, what about you? Last words, shout outs, events that you may do.
Shout outs to 174, my new online home. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, depends on the day.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I mean, I said it earlier, I'm like 99% sure that I'm done on my main account after this current Hello Happy World event, which I'm shooting for T1 in the song rankings. As far as Bandori is concerned, I'll probably continue to play casually on a side account and maybe snag a T10. Who knows? For Sekai, I have one T1 planned, and then the running joke is that I'm tiering every event in the game. Because I can't make up my mind ever about what I want to tier. And I like every character in Sekai, so it's hard for me. In Bandori, it was easy. It's like, okay, is it a Sai event? All right, I'm tiering it. Is it a Mashiro event? I'm tiering it. In Sekai, it's like, well, every character, at least like my top 8, are all so close. It's like, yeah, I want to tier all of these events.
Oh boy.
So choosing events has been difficult for me, but there's one that I have my eyes set on. It's actually going to be a 174 Civil War against R2. So that should be a fun event. I'm looking forward to it to see if I can stand up to the behemoth that is R2 Salt.
And also, I guess, follow R2 Salt.
Yes, R2 Salt and R2 Pepper on Twitter.
True. Well, both of you.
She even has an online store.
Oh yeah, for sure. Promo right there, just casual promo.
R2 Salt. Big cartel.
Her merch is super cute. She's got Bandori merch, Sekai merch. I think other stuff. I don't know.
I'm probably going to show up in a local con and shill some more money for R2 Salt. So look forward to that.
and if the ANYC staff is listening, approve her for Artist Alley. Thanks.
For sure. Well, both of you, again, a great pleasure having you on. Thank you again for your time. And for everyone else, this episode has now ended. The set has been complete. Get your cans ready. Make sure you're ready to refill for the next episode. Until then, be sure to check out the podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and of course, also check out the Anga Academy Discord server. Links below where you can contribute to these live recordings and discussion of podcasts, as well as meet special guests as well featured on the podcast. So until then, everyone, please take care. We'll see you all next time. Bye now.